I'd say just like the general principle of incorporating a routine and the importance of establishing a really consistent routine. And the reason why is that every performance environment, no matter what you do, whether it's the military or sports or business, it doesn't matter. The performance environment itself is incredibly complex. There's so many moving parts. It's never the same. And it's just always changing. In fact, I tell our players all the time, I'm like, the cool thing about baseball is that let's just say there's approximately 200 pitches in every baseball game. With every single pitch, the game changes.
Welcome to the Elev8 podcast. I'm your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. Thank you for tuning in. If you are a return listener, I'd be grateful for your rating or review. And if you dig this episode, give us a like or share. And now, whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode was a student athlete himself playing college baseball at UC San Diego, going on to earn his master's in sports psychology as well as a PhD in performance psychology. He's also worked as a master resilience trainer and performance expert for the U.S. Army. You can follow him on Twitter at MentallyPerform. He is also the mental skills coach for the San Francisco Giants. Welcome to the Elev8 podcast, Mr. Kellen Lee.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, excited to have you on. I know you are a student athlete as well, so maybe you could start there and take us a little bit from your time as a college baseball player to your role and work you do now with the Giants.
Yeah, as a college baseball player, I played at UC San Diego, go Tritons. And as a player, I was really always fascinated by the mental side of the game. My coach, Dan O'Brien, did a really good job of introducing us as a team to mental game concepts that we could apply to ourselves, but also as a team. And we definitely saw the benefits of applying all those concepts. I saw it to myself, and I really reached a level of potential and playing that I never really thought was possible for myself. And I attribute a lot of it to the mental game. At the same time, I had quite a bit of failure like the next season. So I was an All-American my junior year, and my senior year had high expectations. I really had, aspirations to go on, beyond college. And I really struggled a lot. And I truly believe that I was caught up in the wrong things. I was focusing on the draft and being a pro and all these things. And it really got in my way of being successful. So I knew there was definitely something to this mental game. And then from there, I knew that going into the field of sports psychology or performance psychology was really in my cards. So at the time, actually, my coach got a brand new job at a new university. So I actually worked on staff for him for 2 years at Santa Clara University. At the same time, I was going through my master's program. And at the time, I really didn't know whether I wanted to go into coaching or, do the mental skills side. It was kind of a fork in the road. But then what was cool is I went to a baseball coaches convention and I sat into a presentation, really stumbled into the presentation. And it happened to be someone who was the mental skills coach for the Atlanta Braves. And he was talking about his role and his job. And I was fascinated. Again, I was really a motivated young graduate student, and I was, fresh into my career. And I was like, wow, like that's really cool. So ever since then, I was really fixated on working in professional baseball. So from there, I did some consulting after I finished my master's degree for a couple of years, worked with some college teams, with some individual athletes, had a really great time. And again, I was really, on a quest to work in professional baseball. So I talked to some people that work in professional baseball, and they really advised me to get more full-time experience doing the work. So then I transitioned into working with the military for 3 years, the U.S. Army, which was an incredible experience. Got to work with an unbelievable team of professionals that I grew from and learned from. And then, at about 3 years into that job, opening popped open with the San Francisco Giants, and it was a great fit. I interviewed with them, and I now I'm moving on to year 3 with the Giants. Can't believe it. It's incredible. It's been a great experience. But in the mix of all that, actually, I was crazy enough to go back and get my PhD in performance psychology because I determined that my formal education wasn't quite complete. It definitely is now, because that was quite the journey to get that done in the midst of working full time with a family and everything. But I'm glad I did it. But yeah, that's my story. Now current mental skills coach for the San Francisco Giants and loving every second of it, and really have loved the journey up until this point as well.
I loved, I didn't know about your journey, the stint with the Army. Is there something maybe from that experience that you use frequently with your athletes?
Yeah, in fact, I would say that like the one thing I've taken a lot of things away from the work with the military, specifically with the Army. The biggest thing that I took away is that everything can be conceptualized or seen as a performance, no matter what you do. Because I was asked to work with a wide range of soldiers within the Army, doing a ton of different jobs that honestly I didn't even know existed in the Army. So it was a challenge to apply all of my sport and performance psychology concepts to, context and performance environments that I never really thought about. For example, I worked quite a bit with military medical personnel, talking with the surgeons and the medics and the pilots that'll operate on a Black Hawk as a unit, or all the way to the IT people in the Army who set up the Wi-Fi and the internet and all those guys at at a particular base, and just got to work and really think critically about all these concepts and see like, how could I apply these skill sets, these concepts to these people who I don't really know anything about what they do. And it was cool to for me to come into their world and for me to bring them into mine. And I use that principle to this day. Like, even as a former player, there's a lot of what professional baseball players go through that I never really had to think about. So I just love them stepping into my world and me stepping into their world and really meeting each other in the middle, because that's really where the magic happens. But also I think a lot of what we did with the soldiers in that program that I was a part of is training leaders and training the coaches within the Army. And a lot of what I do with the Giants now is I work a lot with the coaches. I'd say probably my time is split between 50-50, probably pretty even between players and coaches, where I share concept with coaches. I break it down with coaches. We collaborate on, how to best get our players to develop quickly and efficiently. And that includes strength coaches and athletic trainers and really all the support staff as well. But really working alongside and collaborating with staff members is another skill set that directly translates working in a high performance environment within the Army. Sure.
I think that key word, I think you just kind of said there, the environment. I think if you're not, when it comes to mental performance, I think my experience too with teams, if you're not involved with most of all the stakeholders that the athletes are going to interact with, it really weakens your ability to maximize some of the things, right?
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
So one question, what do you love that challenges you in your work?
Yeah, I think solving the unsolvable puzzle of every player's unique mental game. I think there are, of course, general principles that I would say apply across the board, but every single player has different thought patterns, different thought defaults, different, habits that either help them or don't help them on the field. And being able to piece all of those puzzle pieces together to create the most consistent mental game possible. It's almost impossible to do, because everyone knows how our brains works. It changes on a daily basis. And how our perception and our perspective and how we see the world directly translates to, how we train and how we conceptualize ourselves within the framework of a team or our career. So it's almost like an unsolvable continuous puzzle that I love to engage with every day, getting to know these players and try to understand, for me to try to understand their thought process is incredibly hard, because it's hard for them to understand their own thought processes. So that is the one challenge that I thoroughly enjoy, is to try to solve an unsolvable puzzle of understanding every single player and person that I come in contact with. Because as we know, understanding ourselves is hard enough, but understanding other people can be incredibly challenging as well. And it is.
Yeah. No doubt. It does make it fascinating and fun at the same time.
No doubt.
Speaking of fun, is there a mental skill that you get jazzed to teach or you get excited to share with others when you get the opportunity?
Oh man, there's so many good ones to choose from. I would say that like I'm gonna cop out and throw out a skill that I can incorporate other skills into.
Good.
Just because I think it's like I said, this is an unsolvable puzzle and so complex. But I'd say just like the general principle of incorporating a routine and the importance of establishing a really consistent routine. And the reason why is that every performance environment, no matter what you do, whether it's the military or sports or business, it doesn't matter. The performance environment itself is incredibly complex. There's so many moving parts. It's never the same. And it's just always changing. In fact, I tell our players all the time, I'm like, the cool thing about baseball is that let's just say there's approximately 200 pitches in every baseball game. With every single pitch, the game changes. And for us in order to stay as consistent as possible, we are the ones that should not change because the game is always changing. So it's important to have that really very consistent routine.
Yeah.
And within the framework of that routine, we can incorporate, breathing techniques or visualization or, focal points or really anything that they find helpful or effective self-talk or something like that. So that's why, like, if I had to choose one, I'd probably choose a routine because within that framework of the routine, we can incorporate just all of those consistent mental skills to really maximize performance. In a very ever-changing environment, it's important for us to be as consistent and flatline as possible.
I think the overlooked sometimes with the routine is that it also gives you a process for evaluation, right? Like
totally
why that didn't work, or, last, series that felt great now, but it gives you, if don't have really something to kind of evaluate off of, it makes it harder to tweak and find those performance, advantages, I guess, just like you said, all the other things that become a part of that.
Totally. And I think like you hit it right on, is that like encouraging players to evaluate their routine actually helps them be much more process oriented, as opposed to only focusing on or like evaluating the results or like what happened in that game or the series. Like the more you emphasize something that's process oriented, like a routine, the more the players are going to start to value those aspects that you emphasize as a coach. So I think like the more you can have conversation facilitate like those questions or just really prompt those players to evaluate their process, the more likely they are to adopt that process oriented mindset that we know is incredibly effective and beneficial for them. So I think that that's a great point, in that the more we can like get them to reflect on the routine versus the results, I think that's going to be such a game changer for them long term in terms of how well they can just reflect and just learn from the whole process of competing.
No doubt. You mentioned kind of stumbling into a conference room. On that kind of note of education and learning, is there, a mentor, author, or someone otherwise, or a couple people that you're like love to learn from or read, or that you're able to take some things from and apply them to your work?
Yeah, I try to learn from as many people as possible, and as a graduate student, really a lifelong student, lifelong learner, I try to find just like a variety. And I think like I try not to stay within just the lanes of sport and performance psychology. I try to go into the peripherals, into leadership and like emotional intelligence and different aspects of just a human experience. So if I had to choose one author that I truly gravitate towards, is Simon Sinek. I really enjoy his discussions on business leadership and some of the principles of mindset that he alludes to, and just a lot of great principles that I think can be applied to a lot of different contexts. So, I share a lot of Simon Sinek content with our players and our coaches, and I recommend his books all the time. And another author I want to give a shout out to is Brene Brown. I really enjoy her stuff as well around emotional intelligence and courage and leadership. And there's just a lot of good stuff out there. And again, like, of course, I definitely am a huge sport and performance psychology nerd, but I try to like expand my horizon a little bit to see how I can synthesize all this information together to really provide the best resources and content for the players that I work with.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, Brene is fascinating. Have you watched that Netflix? Her Netflix? Oh
yeah,
again?
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Good. I was like, me and my wife are waiting to watch that together, so it's been in the queue. It's
really good.
I love her stuff as well. kind of tangent off some of Brené's social emotional learning, stepping into mindfulness and meditation, that I feel has drastically changed in the sports environment and in our world. And how does that play a role? Is it, player specific? I'm sure. I mean, again, those things become personal parts of our routine, those kind of things. But how have you seen that play out, and how do you see kind of mindfulness and meditation a couple of years from now in sport?
Yeah, I think I'd say the most common way I use the concept of mindfulness with our players is simply just bringing their awareness to the fact that our mind can drift to the past, present, and future. And really sometimes we don't recognize that it's happening. We aren't very intentional with where our mind tends to drift in terms of the past, present, and future. And then at that point, like, just facilitate a discussion around, like, well, when we're competing, where do you think we want our mind to be? Like, at the most basic form. Because I think at times when we jump into just saying, like, all right, guys, we want to be present-minded focused all the time, their eyes might gloss over. So it's really starting from the foundation of, like, let's just acknowledge that our mind can go to 3 different places. Let's understand that foundational concept. And then from there go, like, all right, so when you're competing, do you want to be thinking about the past? Do you want to be thinking about the future? Do you want to think about the present? And 95% plus go, like, well, of course I want to be focused on the present moment. Excellent. So now let's get into the skill set to bring our mind and our focus to the present moment we're competing. So that's like, I would say that's probably the way I would facilitate that conversation up front if someone's not really familiar with mindfulness, or doesn't have a mindfulness practice in their daily routine. That's how I kick it off, is just, let's just acknowledge this fact. And then from there, like you said, is very individualized. So based on how I get to know the player, I can understand whether do they struggle with, like, the thought replacement or, like, CBT based strategies. Okay, well, let's go for more of a mindfulness based technique where they're more accepting of their thoughts and they're more observing their thoughts, and one specific skill under the framework or under the umbrella of mindfulness that I tend to default to, that I think is super effective, is just this idea of diffusion from our thoughts, where instead of, like, latching onto our thoughts and believing they're true and just running on this runaway train of what our thoughts are doing, just being able to detach and name our thoughts to create more space between what happens to us and our response. And so again, like, this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's important to understand and have so many skill sets and tools in your toolkit as a practitioner, just to provide the athlete with what they need and not necessarily what you want or feel comfortable in talking about. Because there's been times where I've had a conversation with a player and I'm like, man, like, they could really benefit from, like, a really complex concept. And maybe I'm not as comfortable talking about a particular skill than other ones, but it's not really about me. It's about what they need in that moment. And so I just try to, like, continue to expand the toolkit and giving them as many strategies as I can, whether it's mindfulness based or not. It really doesn't matter to me. I just want them to have the best mental skill set so they can perform as consistently and as elite as possible.
Love it. Let's see. I'm going to ask you if you could wave a magic wand today, Kellen, and every baseball player, student athlete out there would adopt a mental skill practice. What would the thing you'd want all kids and student athletes out there tinkering with if you could make magic happen today?
Whew, man, that is an excellent question. I would say it not necessarily a skill, but more an adoption of a mindset, if that's fine. Okay.
No rules for this question.
Okay, excellent.
We got a magic wand. We got a magic
Beautiful.
wand.
Yeah, you're right. We had a magic wand. So if I had a magic wand, I would want every student athlete or really person to adopt the mindset that regardless of their skill level, their goal of improvement and continuous development should never change. And that includes, like, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of their skill level, regardless of the role that they play within their organization, whether it's sports or not. Because at the end of the day, your skill set and your environment and your role that you fill in your particular organization or team, there's so many factors that go into that, but the only factor that doesn't go into that particular decision is the one that you need to make on a daily basis, is that I just need to get better and develop and improve and learn. And if I could get everyone to adopt that idea that, you know, the rate and the way that they learn is going to be more indicative and more predictive of their future versus what their current situation is. That's what I would want for people, because I think so many times people get caught up in what their present situation is and almost like use it as a predictive measurement tool of the future, but it's really not. Like, we can change and influence the future by just simply learning, changing, developing, adapting to what we're currently, our current state. So that's the one thing I would want them to adopt, is no matter what their situation or circumstances or skill level, just adopt the same goal of improving and developing on a daily basis. That's it.
Have some faith in your neuroplasticity that's allowed us to survive for so many years, right?
That's it, man. That's it.
One last question I always love to ask our guests is how do you view or define success?
Ooh, man. Another good one. I would say that it's relative to what you're doing. It's relative to the individual. And I would say that success is defined by your ability to perceive progress in developing yourself and your craft and whatever it might be. So again, I want it to be much more process-oriented definition, because if I only focus on the long-term success or outcomes that come from our work, a lot of that, there's so many factors that go into that. So I really want the success just to be a continuous improvement, very similar to the answer to the previous question, but it's just a perception of progress and development in whatever, or like who you are as a person, or what your craft is, or what your, you know, skill set might be. So just looking back in the mirror and going like, yeah, I developed today. I would say that would be my definition of success.
Thank you for tuning in and all the way to the end. Appreciate that. If something this episode caught your ear, is useful or unique, I would love if you would share it, or, you know, a thumbs up is always encouraging as well. If you want to come back and check out more videos, smash that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications, and we'd love to have you back. Have a great day and go elevate others.